Matthew, everyday audiophile, music lover, and as always, beer enthusiast. Now today we're having another mini ripper, but it will make sense in just a moment. This is the Voodoo Ranger Juice Force, one of their more popular Voodoo Rangers of note, and it is for a good reason. It is damn tasty, that is for sure. So let's open this up and let's talk about today's video. Now, I will admit today's video is something that I have been looking forward to for a long time. Let's give this a shot. As always, it's delicious. So, I've been looking forward to this for a while, for probably 2 months now. Now, most of the time, I do find myself listening to jazz or a lot of folk, some indie every once in a while, some electronic music. But sometimes I do listen to Teddy Swims. This is his 12-inch album, and on the second track is Lose Control, his single. This is a 12-inch 33 RPM album, or 33 and a third if we're going to get technical. But if you wanted to, you could get the single version of that. And singles are 7 inches. It's cute. This is a 45 RPM. So if we're looking at a purely technical, how much information is there per inch on this compared to a 33 inch, it's actually about the same for that second track. So keep that in mind. The information is about the same for the needle moving across that record. But, oh, it's way down here. But recently Target announced tiny vinyl. What is this? A 4-inch version of that single. And it is just as cute as it sounds like it's going to be. It is the smallest thing ever. Look at that. I don't even have words for this and how small it is, other than to say, without listening to it, that it's a novelty. There's no real reason for anyone to get something this small, because if you are going to get vinyl, you're going to get the 12-inch, or you're going to get the 7-inch if it happens to be a track that you really enjoy, because that 45 RPM, again, it can make a difference. But this is what we're going to talk about. How does this sound in comparison to the 7-inch offering and the 12-inch offering? But first, I'm going to have another drink. Okay, so 12-inch first. This album, surprisingly, it is pretty well mastered. There is a decent amount of 3D space in the album. It's not a flat soundstage. It does have a little bit of depth to it. The version that I have is blue. This was actually the Record Store Day 2024 release, or maybe early 2025. So this part 1.5 is newer than the original album, but it still has the same master track on it. Now, if we're purely looking at my notes, what I wrote down for the 12-inch, at least for this specific track, Lose Control, was that there was good 3D space. The bass wasn't too heavy or over-processed. It was a very natural bass that had a decent amount of texture to it for this type of music. Please keep that in mind as I'm going through this. And you could hear the warble in his voice at the end of his sentences. It was really nice to hear compared to the digital version, where that doesn't quite come through. You can't hear him really trying to sing into that microphone. But on the vinyl, yes, it comes through pretty nicely. That is just the bass line. When we move to the 7-inch, because it's a 45 RPM, it got a little bit better, but it got a little bit worse at the same time because, and this is going to get a little bit technical, but it's going to play into the 4-inch discussion. So I've taken the record out. As you can see, this one is white and orange. It looks pretty nice in person. But tone arms have to track across the entire record from a single point. If you ever go and look at a turntable, if you haven't before, you see that the tone arm starts in one place and moves in towards the center. So it stands to reason that the cartridge, the needle, is only ever perfectly parallel in two spots, the most outer spot or the closer to the inner spot. Now, there are different alignments that you can do with that cartridge to change when that perfect alignment happens. And when it is outside of those perfect spots, you get a little bit of distortion because it is now reading a track at an angle. It's not perfectly parallel, it's a little bit slanted. And so, as you get closer to the inside of the record, you deal with two issues. First, a record spins at a constant rate, so the outside of the record is moving faster than the inside of the record, which means that for a given inch on the groove, you get more data. You get more data storage, so to speak, on the outside of the record than the inside of the record. It's very often that I'll find the outside of a really well-recorded album will usually sound better than the inside. And if you know what you're looking for, know what you're listening for, it is very easy to hear every single time. So that is where the 45 here, the 7-inch, has something going for it and something going against it. It is 45 RPM, so the amount of information on that per inch basis is actually about the same as the 12-inch here at 33 for that second track. But the starting point of the needle isn't in the ideal place. It's not on the outside of the record of a 12-inch, so there is a little bit more distortion because of that. Now, modern turntables, it's not as much of an issue, but I did hear some of it, and it's not unique to this record, but let's go over my thoughts. So, thoughts on the 7-inch. The singer, Teddy Swims, instead of being a little bit further into the room with the 12-inch, he's actually, it sounds like he's singing up closer to the microphone on this. Like it was the same take, the same original, but mastered differently. And I think it really shows on the 7-inch. It is not exactly the same as the 12-inch. Additionally, the bass was just slightly more textured. Just a little bit. Enough that if you were listening to them side by side, you could hear it, but not outside of that. And the most important thing, and I thought this was interesting, was that compared to the 12-inch version, on the 7-inch 45, the speakers disappeared completely. I could not hear them. I could still hear them on the 12-inch. I could hear them playing in the room. But on the 7-inch, gone. Now that said, as we got towards the inside of the record, remember, this is a 7-inch 45, so you only fit one track per side. As we got towards the end of the track, that texture on the bass, it wasn't there anymore. It kind of sounded like I was listening to a digital version of it where there was just noises. So it was a really interesting sensation getting that awesome sound in the beginning on the outside of the record, but still great to listen to. Still all of the texture in the voice, but in the bass, it just wasn't quite there anymore. That then leads us to this little guy. I mean, it's interesting, that's for sure, how small this is. Let me put them next to each other real quick. Here is the 7-inch, so you can see what we're dealing with here. And then the 12-inch. That should give you a good idea of what size this is. All right. This is a toy. This isn't meant to be played on a real record player. This is meant for you to say that you have one and put it up on your wall. The first thing that you're going to notice when you put these on, and I don't know about any of the other ones, but it is at least true with this one, is that it is audibly quieter than the 7-inch or the 12-inch. And the big issue that causes for me is that it's just not as dynamic. I can turn it up and I can get the average volume to be about the same as the other ones, but it doesn't have any of the dynamics that the other two have. Even my wife, who refrains from commenting on almost everything audio, said that it sounded distant. It sounded like Teddy swims and all of the instruments were behind a pillow. Like they were covered by something and you couldn't hear all of the detail. She usually doesn't comment, so whenever she says something, she actually hears it. She stopped what she was doing to let me know. Additionally, the highs were rolled off. They just weren't there, really. It was soft and not very detailed. The bass was artificially enhanced or mastered to be increased louder than the other two versions that I have here. And I think that speaks about the audience that this is really after. It's not an audiophile release by any means because, like I said, this is on the very inner part of that groove where you get the most distortion out of your tone arm and cartridge, and there's the least amount of data possible out of any of these other records for the track that you're listening to. So not only are you dealing with lower storage capacity for the inside groove of this, but you get distortion, huge distortion issues with the tone arm. So nothing was really working in favor of this. I do think it's fun, but I really don't recommend getting these unless you absolutely want to have one and you want to put it on your shelf and say that you have it, like I do now. But really, that is my review of the Tiny Vinyl. It is tiny cute for sure, but definitely not something that I would recommend to nearly anyone unless you have extra money to spend and you just like to give it away. That's really my honest thoughts on it. But until then, I will see y'all next week. Cheers.